Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for part of Words and Pictures Festival 2021. We're so excited to have you here. This is our 5th year doing Words and Pictures at Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries and our 2nd time doing it online. And my name is Mary Obler, and I am the Deputy Director of Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries. And I am joined by Michelle Wagner, who works in our Outreach and Community Partnerships Division. And we are so excited today to be here with some authors that are also staff members of Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries. So just a few housekeeping things is that we are recording today. So if you do not want to be seen, you can turn off your camera and you can put questions in the chat and we'll monitor them and ask them at the end. And now I'm going to get to introducing our first author, who, as I said, is also a staff member at Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries. Kristen Buehner is a newer library worker, pastime violin player, and all-around distractible person. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Creative Writing and English Literature from Pacific University and is thinking about trying this library thing out long-term. Their hobbies include snuggling with their kitties, checking out more books than is humanly possible to read from multiple libraries, and scrolling through various phone apps before finally realizing she has other hobbies like writing and practicing violin. And you can find KB, as they are also known, at Cascade Park Library. So I'm going to turn it over to Kristen and let them read for us today.
Thank you, Mary. All right. So today my plan is to read a couple of poems and then an excerpt from actually a nonfiction project that I'll explain about a little bit later. So the first poem I will read is about a Stradivarius violin that I saw in Spain. And if you don't know, if the audience, someone in the audience doesn't know what a Stradivarius violin is, basically it's just a really expensive, rare violin by this guy named Stradivari, who was very famous for that. So the title is Violin Grande del Quartetto Real. Stradivari's hands were unforgiving. I can still feel the curve of his calluses whittling me down, the constant cuts and digs of his knife tightening my curves just so, the deliberate force of his shoulders as he glued all my pieces together, leaving me hollow inside. All the knocks, the holes he shaped, and the days of polish lathered and cured into my skin. Even the slight diamonds the etchings carved, then settled, embedded right into my flesh. Oh, how careful and terrible those long days of my birth. But the day he wound the strings taut above my face, what sweet tension the chords of voice, all I wanted to say right before me, waiting still. When he pulled the bow, barbed and sticky with tree sap, oh, the first call, finally I could begin to be. My hollow center hummed, everything in me working to resound my voice. But he placed me down again, knocking at me, fingers and tools through my open face, moving my insides around, his close eyes damning every flaw. I am hidden behind glass now, tucked away beneath tapestries, faded paintings, hundreds of close eyes admire perfection that still aches in my bones. I lay silent, my voice and all I want to say before me, waiting still. Someday I'll be lifted by hands like honey. I'll nestle just beside her neck, pulsing with her artery beat, her shoulder warm against my cool polish. Her hands bring my voice to perfect tension. She settles the bow, and finally, everything in my body will be right. We will melt into the song we make. Okay. Next poem, the second one, last one I'll read, doesn't have a title yet. I will call it Polaris. Right above their house, just at the end of the cul-de-sac, is the Big Dipper. And Grandpa teaches me to follow its edge up to find the North Star, how Polaris begins the Little Dipper, the tale of the little bear, how much we translate the world to find our place in it. The guiding star was right above them. Inside the house, his wife suffocates, lungs tired, her body full of gray cancer waters. She is lying a hull, sails down, anchors up, drifting until the torrents pass, until the sky opens its map again. Even while he teaches me outside on the sidewalk, I see the rope that tethers them together, sloping from his chest up through the top window of their house, where his wife drifts through frog and brackish coughs. The hills of waves stretch the rope between them taut, but it holds. In a few months, he'll kiss her and go to bed, and a handful of hours later, he'll wake to the sound of soft lapping of waves. Around him, nothing, only firefly sky and dark ocean. His tether, the knot they tied at smiling 19, come undone in the night. He'll paddle without sight of land, look up to the sky, once a storybook of warriors and guides, now a cosmic mess of burning hydrogen, no air or weight to keep him alive. When he finds his North Star, he'll learn it can never take him home. My love, to you I am bound with tethers that will fray, but if you ever find yourself floating on waters you think uncharted, I hope I'll have been enough of a compass for you that the map we'll have written together will help you swim to rocky shore, that the sky will keep telling its story. Right. And then a last piece, it will be a little bit longer. I think I can contain it within the 10 minutes, but this is a nonfiction piece from a project that is more of like a mixtape. So this section is from a smaller section titled Hallelujah. The bigger project is like basically a mixtape of songs and how those songs have come up in my life and affected me. And this particular section is titled Hallelujah by various artists. The first time I heard Hallelujah was during Catholic Mass. I can still remember the swell of voices filling the church, charging the walls, electrifying the air into something even now, years distance from the church, that I can only remember as holy. Our voices moved up and down, reaching higher and higher in each vow, each Alleluia, a sunrise and sunset of calls. It all sounded so much bigger than the sum of us and was one of my favorite moments of the service, though the rest of it was practiced and careful. In every movement, the standing and kneeling, joining hands for the Our Father prayer, each step I earnestly strained to perform just right. I aimed to please, and I remember singing as loud as I could, following the notes that filled my throat, hoping Sunday after Sunday that the music would cross me over to the joy it promised. One night in my freshman dorm in college, through some random happenstance of a Nerf basketball hitting the strings of his guitar, my partner Tyler and his roommate discovered he could sit with the guitar and control the chords on the fretboard, while his roommate Ruben threw a Nerf basketball at the strings to make them sound. And this kept them entertained for a good hour, keeping the timing of the ball with the changing of the chords. And it was Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, one of the least jovial songs Tyler knew how to play, that they decided to butcher. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah, Tyler giggled in his gawky baritone. They'd broken the song down from its mournful and spiritual meditation just to the silly mechanics, the tempo of the notes with the basketball, the chorus and verses, all the muscle memory without the meaning, but they made something new, replaced it with the bonding laughter of new friends. The next time I heard Cohen's song was on the way to the hospital. It was the first day of spring break freshman year, but before that, we'd been driving out to go camping with friends, Tyler and I. His mother called and we pulled over, and she told us that his grandfather had been in an accident. They were waiting on brain scans. It didn't look good. When he hung up with her, Tyler got out and walked meters away from the car, then wandered back to lean on the trunk for a time, head down, the red brake lights glowing in the misty dusk air. When he got back in the car, he put on the CD mixtape I made for him for Christmas. We drove to the happy sounds of side A, pop and punk that didn't seem to fit but seemed to distract him enough. We drove through the back roads to the hospital, the night pressing into the car as we filled the cramped cab with music. On side B, Jeff Buckley's version of Cohen's Hallelujah came on, and Tyler smiled. I played this for him, Ty said, when I was living with him over winter break. I was just playing on the guitar and didn't think anyone was home, but he came into the room. He said it was his and Grandma's song before she died, and he listened for a while and then went away. Tyler paused for a bit before saying, I only just started getting to know him. There's a point where the ache of loss and the cool acceptance of serenity meet, where they walk in tandem with one another across some tightrope of emotion. And this, I think, is where the best music comes from, where rage and serenity meet, where joy and sadness cross, anywhere two opposing forces collide and join hands, take two parts of the heart and pull until it's stretched so tight, it starts to grow. It's my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for sharing that with us. It was really wonderful to hear some of your words. We really appreciate you being here today. And for those that joined us while Kristen was speaking, we are here at our Words and Pictures author reading of all staff FVRLibraries staff members. So that was Kristen Buehner reading some of their work today. Thanks so much for sharing that, Kristen. Next, we have Elizabeth Townsend is going to be our next reader. Elizabeth is the author of Just Like Magic, which is a YA adaptation of Cinderella. She's also the monthly book beat columnist for the City of Vancouver's newspaper for seniors called The Messenger. Her other writing credits include blogging about her self-publishing adventures, selling one story to highlights for children, which alas was never published, playing about with poetry, and writing and editing a teen e-newsletter for the library. She's currently in the middle of a sequel to Just Like Magic, which she hopes to finish next year. So I will turn it over to Elizabeth, or as we know her, Beth, to share her words with us.
Thanks, Mary. Can you hear me all? Yes,
yep.
Okay. I'm going to be reading from the end of the first chapter of Just Like Magic. And in order to set the stage a little bit, I'll just tell you a little. Ella Merton is the daughter of a wealthy man who was self-made, but whose death the previous year has proven financially ruinous to Ella, as well as to his widow and two stepdaughters. To cut back on expenses, they're renting their country estate and moving to a smaller house in town. Ella is the first to arrive there, where she is annoyed to see her trunk being carted down into the kitchen. But she's interrupted by the jingle and creaking of another carriage pulling up outside. And here we go into the chapter. Even through the window, I heard a raised voice. Mama, my dress, keep that animal off me. Mon petit, stepmama's Pekingese, let out a few high-pitched yaps. As I reached the street, my stepfamily descended from the carriage. Gerda was out first, a few blonde curls blowing across her face as she held a struggling Mon petit and snapped at Lucy. Leave him alone. He couldn't help it, could you, you little lovey-dovey doggy? He had to stretch his little legs. As Mon petit started sneezing in the pale late March sunlight, stepmama staggered out of the carriage, cutting off Gerda's babbling. Mama, we must get inside. Mon petit will catch a chill, Gerda said, pouting. Yes, my darling. Stepmama adjusted her cloak with what dignity she could muster and fumbled in her reticule for the driver's fee. He finished heaving their few bags from the roof, took stepmama's money and counted it carefully, as Lucy, finding no help from the driver, whisked herself out of the carriage. The driver tipped his hat, clambered back onto his seat, and drove away. "Well," said Lucy, smoothing down her skirts, "if that is an example of the manners we shall have to put up with." "Very distressing, my dear," said stepmamma, panting slightly as she climbed the front steps past 2 marble lions. "And look at those bags." Lucy's voice was rising. "He should have taken them inside." Stepmamma looked around in distress. Is he gone? Then the footman shall have to." "You forget, mamma," snapped Lucy. "No servants shall arrive until tomorrow." "Then we'll simply have to manage, won't we?" faltered stepmamma. "But isn't it a pretty house?" Lucy squinted up at it, then caught sight of me in the doorway. She said, then added in a lower voice, "Mamma, have you spoken to Ella?" "Not yet, dearest." "Mamma, you must. We agreed." Now, what was that about? Stepmamma had seemed to be trying to tell me something in the last few days, but it had never come to anything, only a distressed look in her eyes or a pat on my arm. But before I could think more about it, Lucy and Gerda surged past me up the stairs and into the house. As they peered into the different rooms, I could hear, "Mamma, the furniture must be unsheeted. And a fire started. They put my piano in the wrong place. I'm hungry. Where's the food? Heavens, can't you do something about that animal?" That was Lucy, directed at Mon Petit, who was standing up at his sitting room window, panting on the glass. Stepmamma gazed at me, face drooping. "Ella, dear, could you bring in the bags? I must see to the girls. It shan't take long. I know. And the food? Did you find the kitchen, dear?" "Why should I bring them in?" I asked, shocked. "The driver didn't do it, and we really can't leave them in the street, can we? Coming, girls." This in response to Gerda's petulant, "Mama!" So I had to be a porter? Well, I would carry in stepmamma's, but that was all. Let Lucy and Gerda complain. I wasn't their servant. I trudged upstairs with stepmamma's bag and met Lucy on the upper landing. "And where's mine?" she demanded. "In the street." "Then get it now. I need it." "Go get it yourself, Lucy, since you didn't get the servants here in time to do it." Lucy glared at me, then stormed down the stairs. I opened the door to the front bedchamber. It was full of mahogany furniture. I dropped stepmamma's bag next to the bed, then looked around curiously. No, there was only one bed. I must be squashed into the third bedchamber with Gerda. Frowning, I turned to leave when Lucy appeared, propelling stepmamma before her. "Mamma, speak to her now. Ella does not appear to understand our situation." Gerda's head popped around the door too. Stepmamma looked at me unhappily and began twisting the edge of her shawl. I raised my chin. "I certainly understand our situation, Lucy," I said. "We're poor. We don't have quite as many maids as you'd like. And I think I'll retire to my room now and get out of your way." "Your room? Well, my dear," said stepmamma, looking around like a trapped sheep. "It's just that this is a very little house, you know. We couldn't afford a larger." "I know that. I know someone will have to share. I assume I'm sharing a chamber with Gerda?" Glancing from Lucy to Gerda, I saw they were both smirking. I looked back at stepmamma. "Isn't that so?" My voice rose. "Well, actually, dear, we've given you the most comfortable room in the house. So warm," babbled stepmamma, waving her hands with an anxious look. I stepped back. "What do you mean? Where?" Stepmamma looked at me pleadingly, and Lucy spoke. "In the kitchen," she said shortly. "What?" My voice was incredulous, and stepmamma grasped my arm. "My dear, it's the only way. There are only 3 bedchambers, and the attic is full of boxes. We couldn't leave all our things at Merton Manor, not with the tenants." I pulled away from her, trying to keep my temper. "I don't understand," I snapped. "It's very simple, Ella," said Lucy in a maddeningly calm voice. "Mamma decided you are to sleep in the kitchen." "That's ridiculous. Kitchens are for servants." "Stepmamma, you couldn't mean—" "Besides," interrupted Gerda, "it'll be so handy for you to do the cooking." "What? The cook will be doing the cooking." "But we couldn't afford the cook and the maid, dearest," wailed stepmamma, wringing her handkerchief. "Not with a house on this street. Not with all the expenses of the season, the dresses and jewels. Why didn't we rent a different house then? A chill was growing inside me. The girls showed me how we needed a house with a good address for the season. We'll be having a boy to do chores and errands a few days a week, and we'll all be helping out, Ella. It won't be only you. I stared at her in disbelief. Then what will Lucy and Gerda be doing? Tending the fires? Washing the clothes? Stepmama, this is ridiculous. That would be ridiculous, said Lucy with an unpleasant half smile. But we shall dust our rooms. And I shall walk mon petit, Gerda added. I was angry, but still couldn't make myself believe they were serious. And I'm to cook. Well, yes, actually, you are. That's what we decided, Stepmama said, her eyes fixed on the floor. We decided? Who decided? I'm not a cook. But we can't afford one, said Stepmama, raising her voice plaintively. You must, Ella. Your mother was a cook. Surely it runs in the blood, said Lucy, staring intently at her nails. I stared at Lucy, my mouth open. And I bought you something, Stepmama added as she bent over and fumbled about in her bag. Where could it be? Here, no. Ah, she straightened, holding a book, which she pressed into my hand with a pat. This is just for you. I'm sure everything will work out in the end. And now I'll be taking a nap. I find travel so fatiguing. As do I, said Lucy. I shan't be disturbed for the next hour. My bag, Ella? I couldn't believe my ears. Stepmama! Oh, Ella, dear, we must all help with a few odds and ends. I'm sure I can't see any other way. She was gently herding us out of the room now, moaning, my head. Oh, I do miss Marie. Gerda hissed at me as Stepmama's door shut. You see, because of you, Mama can't even have her maid anymore, who's been with us for years and years. Because of me? My mouth dropped open. Because we were so deceived in your father's financial situation. I was so furious, I couldn't speak. Ella, Lucy's voice cut in with a sneer. Must you two stand there and bicker? I require my bag now and tea at 5. Then get it yourself. I wouldn't protest too loudly, Ella, said Lucy smoothly, but there was a spark in her green eyes. You ought to be grateful that we're taking care of you at all when you're no relation to us. Mama could have you put in the poorhouse. Besides, said Gerda, halfway into her room, when I marry, or Lucy, we shall be rich again, and I don't expect you shall have to cook. Just keep Mama company, perhaps. But for now, you wouldn't disobey Mama, would you? Lucy and I shall be attending balls and parties this season. You wouldn't have us ruining our hands and complexions, would you? Well, what about me? I shall be attending balls and parties too. We'll see about that, said Lucy with a little smile before she swished into her room and shut the door. I stood frozen, staring at their doors, listening to the noises of their moving about, unpacking. This couldn't be happening. How could Stepmama have listened to them and dismissed the cook and maid? I knew they had always despised me, but I finally turned from their doors and trudged down the stairs. The bags. Stepmama had said to bring in the bags. Hardly knowing what I was doing, I went outside and carried them in, dumping them upstairs in the hall. Then I paused. The kitchen. My things were in the kitchen. That was why the driver had taken my trunk downstairs. With a shaking hand, I pushed open the kitchen door. It moved with a squeal, revealing a shadowy, descending stairway. Shutting my eyes, I smelled a faint trace of garlic mixed in with onion. I stood for a minute, trembling. Then I started downstairs and slammed the door behind me.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, clapping. Thank you, Elizabeth. That was wonderful. I'm so glad you got to share that with us, and I am desperate to know more.
It is available on Amazon.
Great. Yes.
It's self-published.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, we're really just so grateful for you to be here today and share that with you. And oh, there's the cover. Yeah, thanks for sharing. We'll get a link into the chat real soon. And Thank you so much. All right, so next on our reading list, we have Rosie Wilder. And Rosie has an MFA in creative writing in fiction from Eastern Washington University. She typically writes novel-length fiction about people with magical powers. She lives in Vancouver with her roommate and their 4 cats, and she is not published, so do not ask. And I will turn it over to Rosie to read for us today.
Hi, thank you. So I'll be reading from a book I'm working on, still in progress. And it's about a young woman named Jessie, and she has hit rock bottom in her life. And the book kind of jumps around in time. So I'll be reading from 1998, and that's when she's 13 years old. And she's currently staying with her grandmother in this eccentric seaside town because her mother is off trying to start a new career. So at this point in the story, she has been invited to the popular girl's house, and she finds out how mean they are. And at this point, she has to make a decision what kind of person she wants to be. So it kind of starts in the middle of where they're upstairs hanging out and talking to each other. Okay. They went up the spiral staircase and unfortunately past the turret and through a pair of double doors. It was the biggest bedroom Jessie had ever seen, complete with a king-size bed, a couch and window seat, and a walk-in closet. Before we do the thing that I have planned, we have to play more truth and dare, Emily announced, sinking into an inflatable chair. You guys will see why. Jessie joined the others on the couch. Only Brianna seemed excited. Truth or dare, Emily said, her cat-like eyes jumping from face to face. Megan. Truth, Megan said. Emily sighed in irritation. You literally always say truth. You're so boring. I don't even know what else to ask you. Oh, wait, yes, I do. Have you ever, touched yourself? No, Megan said, her face flushing red. Liar, Emily shrieked, laughing. I can tell by how embarrassed you're getting. She always turns red when she lies. Jessie had some retorts to that, but she knew better than to say them, at least for now. Well then, truth or dare, Emily, Megan said. Dare, Emily said haughtily. Megan hesitated and then pounded. I dare you to tell the next guy we see that you think he's hot. Emily shrugged. Fine, done. Truth or dare, Jessie. Jessie crossed her arms. Truth. Okay, so tell us why, Emily began, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Your mom was at the mental hospital. Jessie took a deep and tired breath. People had asked her this before, but usually the askers were friends. Emily was most decidedly not a friend. Also, her mother didn't like her talking about it. When she found out that Jessie had told Sylvia, her best friend, she'd had a total meltdown. Lost amid her conflicting feelings, Jessie followed a callous instinct and said, which time? She's been in there more than once, Brianna asked, mystified. Impressed even? Jessie shrugged. Yeah, 3 times. Jesus, why? Emily asked. They were all looking at her with a focus that felt deferential, and Jessie felt strangely older and mature in their limelight. Different reasons. Twice for psychotic breakdowns. She paused, the urge to tell thundering over her like an avalanche. Once for trying to kill herself. The girls collectively gasped, and Jessie absorbed their emotional expressions, their leeching excitement. Immediately, her heart dropped with the knowledge that she'd done the wrong thing. That's horrible, Tiffy mewled. I'm so sorry, Jessie, Megan said. How scary, Brianna agreed. How'd she do it, Emily asked. Were you the one who found her? My turn is over, sorry, Jessie said. Truth or dare, Tiffy. She'll pick truth, Emily said mockingly, and she doesn't have anything interesting to tell like you do. So what, Tiffy said, pouting. Can I pick truth, Jessie? Yeah, I don't care, Jessie said, just as Emily sniggered and oh my God. Then truth. Okay, Jessie thought for a moment at a complete loss for an interesting question. She wasn't very curious about the small-boned girl, except for why she was evidently in love with Jamie, but she couldn't ask about that without the girls concluding that Jessie loved him too. So she shook her head and asked, what's the scariest thing that has ever happened to you? Tiffy opened her mouth to answer, but Emily said, and it can't be the Sonia Foot thing. We already know about that. I wasn't going to say that, Tiffy sniffed. I was going to say the time I got in a car accident. An old man hit us in LA and the car flipped over. My mom broke her arm and I got a concussion. We've already heard about that too, Emily said, rolling her eyes. Well, Jessie hasn't, and it's the truth. Fine, whatever, Emily said. Pick me now, then I'll pick Brianna and we'll go. You'll see why. Tiffy pursed her lips like she was going to rebel, but then she let out a breath and said, fine, truth or dare, Emily. Dare, Emily mocked. I don't know, Tiffy whined. You know I'm bad at dares. Just ask me to do literally anything. I'll do it. I don't know, Tiffy repeated in agony, but then Brianna leaned in and whispered something in her ear. I'll allow this, Emily said, but it better be good. Brianna pulled away giggling, and Tiffy looked sick as she said, we dare you to write a love letter to Benny Klein, and you have to give it to him in person, Brianna added. Emily laughed uproariously. Fine, that'll be fun. I'm not scared. Who cares? Jessie frowned. Ben Klein was Jamie's best friend, or at least he had been. He was a quiet, sickly boy with thick glasses. Of course, these brats had targeted him. But he'll think you love him, Tiffy whispered urgently. So I'll let him think I do for a while and then dump him in front of everyone. That's really mean, Tiffy said. Emily scoffed. It was your dare. Don't forget that. He's an asshole anyway. He thinks he's so smart. I don't know, Tiffy said with a nervous glance at Brianna. Maybe we should do a different dare. Nuh-uh, it's done now, Emily said, and I'm doing it. And now, Brianna, truth or dare? You better pick dare. Okay, dare, Brianna said, grinning. Perfect, Emily said, returning the grin, but with a cruel gleam in her eyes. I dare you to knock on Gertle's door and throw crap right in her ugly face. What? Brianna said, laughing nervously. You heard me, Emily said. I don't want to touch poop, Brianna said. Can't it be something else? No, it has to be crap. Cow crap, to be exact. We'll grab some from the Granger's farm on the way. I'll give you rubber gloves, don't worry. Emily stood. Well, are you all coming? Everyone else stood slowly, glancing at each other. Tiffy looked particularly distressed, her sky blue eyes landing on Jessie, beseeching her. Jessie clenched her jaw and nodded minutely, hoping that Tiffy saw the resolve on her face, because she had made a decision. They left the mansion and headed down the street towards town. Emily and Brianna walked together, Megan hustling to keep up with them, while Jessie and Tiffy lagged behind. This is really mean, Tiffy whispered. They watched him across the street as Brianna reached through a fence to collect cow droppings, Emily laughing hysterically behind her. Brianna used to be really close friends with Gertle, Jessie mumbled. Really? Yeah, when I was here last. Back then they were Breenie and Gertle, the weirdos who ran around pretending to be horses. They seemed happy enough. So that's why she's making Bree do it, Tiffy said. Jessie nodded. I'm leaving. I'm going to cut through the alley and warn her. Don't tell. I won't, Tiffy vowed. Jessie didn't know if she believed her, but it didn't matter. She strode forward and announced, I'm going home. I don't want to get in trouble with my grandma. Emily looked at her with a moment's contempt, but then turned stone-faced. That's fine. Anyone else want to run home? Last chance. Megan shook her head no and looked at Tiffy, who quickly did the same. Well, bye then, Jessie, Emily said. Bye, Jessie said, stalking off down the hill at a brisk pace. The back road that led to the cemetery and adjacent funeral parlor where Gerda lived was just up ahead, and she darted down it before the girls could see her. Her heart pounded as she considered the boldness of what she was doing. Emily would retaliate if she found out, and Jessie would be shunned. But her conviction only grew at the thought. She didn't want the approval of someone like Emily anyway. She raced down the narrow alleys between brightly colored homes, sprinklers spritzing in the yards, dogs woofing when they scented her, wind chimes clanging in the salty breeze. The afternoon sun was unusually hot, and by the time she saw the gray brick exterior of the Tartar funeral home, she was a sweltering mess. The funeral home had, of course, always given her the creeps, even though its impeccably landscaped yard blossomed with happy yellow flowers, but nothing could quite subdue the grim spectacle of the cavernous black hearse or the neighboring cemetery. The church was just on the other side, ominously old-fashioned with its weathered gray paint and towering spire. Jessie marched past the hearse and up the porch steps, trying not to think about whether dead bodies were just beyond the front door. She took a shallow breath and rang the bell. Loud footsteps approached, and Mr. Tartar answered. He was dressed in a brown suit, and the scent of some kind of cleaning agent flown through the open door. Oh, he said, frowning at her. Can I help you, young lady? I'm looking for Greta, she said, careful to properly articulate Gertle's real name. Certainly, he said, come in. Jessie clenched her teeth to keep from wincing and took only enough steps to clear the doorway. A long, dim hallway yawned forth, the carpet a garish red pattern. She fully expected to hear organ music, and the silence was almost worse. I'll retrieve her for you, Mr. Tartar said. Whom shall I say is calling? It took her a moment to decipher his question. Jesse Arden. He nodded once and pulled open a pair of sliding doors which led to a stairway. One moment, he said, clomping away. Jessie let out a breath and craned her neck to look around. She saw another pair of sliding doors further down the hall and an open door at the end with a desk and a green study lamp. Other doors were sealed shut by the office. Jessie wondered which ones contained the corpses and shuddered. 2 pairs of footsteps clambered down the stairs and Gertrude appeared, her dark eyes fixed on Jessie rather coldly. What do you want? Gertrude asked in her oddly raspy voice. She's here to say hello, Greta, her father said. He rubbed his hands together and then mopped one across his forehead. He seemed desperate to flee. Jessie wondered if this man was actually more comfortable with dead bodies than his own weirdo daughter. I need to talk to you real quick, Jessie said with renewed urgency, since Emily and her gang would be there any second. Fine, in here, Gertrude said, leading to the other pair of sliding doors. In the chapel, Gertrude? Her father questioned. Yes, Gertrude rasped, ignoring his floundering expression. She slid open the doors and Jessie entered the church-like room with rows of pews facing an altar. Gertrude clapped the doors shut and asked, what is it? So Emily's on her way over with Brianna and all of them, Jessie said. They're going to throw cow poop at you. Gertrude stared at her without expression. She really was very strange looking with her long inverted triangle face and crooked nose. Her frizzy hair appeared to be unbrushed. So just don't answer the door, Jessie went on, frowning. I don't ever answer the door, Gertrude said, regressing into the stutter that had spawned her nickname. As a child, she'd been unable to pronounce the G syllable. The other children had sampled various unflattering names before settling on Gertrude, but she'd chosen to embrace the moniker, assuming the name officially at school and around town. Well, they're still coming, Jessie said. How do you know? I was just at Emily's and they were talking about it. Did you run here? Gertrude asked. Jessie bristled at the note of mockery in her voice. Yes, because I wanted to get here before they could throw crap in your face. She was shocked by how close she'd come to uttering the curse word. A do-gooder, are you? No, I was just... Never mind, I've warned you. Bye. She started for the doors. Who's going to throw it? Jessie sighed. Brianna is supposed to. She was dared by Emily. Again, Gertrude had no visible reaction. While Jessie was glad she wasn't sobbing, this absence of emotion was disturbing too. Then Gertrude asked, want to help me get back at them? How? Gertrude thought for a beat. We locked them in the coffins. What? Jessie barked. Just then someone knocked on the front doors. No, that's even sicker than... But Gertrude wasn't listening. She pushed open the chapel doors and cut off her father, who was on his way to answer the knocking. Gertrude, no, Jessie hissed, sprinting after her. What is going on here, girls? Mr. Tartar asked. Thankfully, Gertrude only looked through the peephole. It's them, she mumbled. Father, send them to the display room, she said, slithering off down the hall. No, Greta, that room is for customers only, Mr. Tartar said, attempting a stern tone. Well, they will be customers someday, Gertrude said. His eyes rolled hugely in exasperation as he watched her disappear into what had to be the display room. He removed a handkerchief from his suit pocket and wiped his forehead. The knocking recurred louder. Jessie hid in the corner when he answered. Hello, girls, he said. Greta isn't feeling up to any visitors today. We just need to see her for a minute, the giggly voice of Brianna replied. No, that's not possible, Mr. Tartar said in the firmest tone yet. You girls run along. He shut the door hard and then noticed Jessie. You better go home too, young lady. Okay, she said, not moving. He frowned like he was debating whether to respond. Then he shook his head and trudged down the hall to his study. Jessie counted to about 50, scared the whole time that Gertrude would summon her, before slipping out the front door. But she hadn't gone far when she heard cackling and conversation. She crept around the back of the building and saw all 4 girls by a window. We see you in there, Gertie, Emily taunted. Oh, let's just go. Her dad, Tiffy began. But then the window whooshed open and liquid splashed out, mostly hitting Emily and Brianna. The girls shrieked and scattered, flailing their arms. That's formaldehyde, Gertrude shrieked, the long tendrils of her hair billowing out the window. You're all poisoned now. Oh my gosh, oh no, Tiffy sobbed, even though she appeared unmarred. Jessie squeezed tighter behind the tree, listening to the pandemonium, questioning her decision to even get up that morning. It's just water, you freak, Emily roared. Throw it, Brianna, throw it right in her ugly face. The window slammed shut, followed by a loud splat. Damn, Emily yelled. What on earth is going on out here? Mr. Tartar boomed suddenly, the crunch of his footsteps passing Jessie. The girls screamed again and took off running. "If you girls return, I will contact the authorities," he called after them. Then he faced the wall and sighed. Jessie guessed it was spattered in cow poop. Jessie waited until he went back inside before leaving her hiding spot. She walked down the side streets at a slower pace now, feeling neither triumphant nor defeated. Mostly, she was disappointed and longing for the familiar sameness of Grammy's house. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. That was excellent. And I guess we can't ask where we can hear more. But yeah, thank you so much to all of our staff authors for reading today. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I'm going to open it up for questions. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or I could also, if you don't mind your face being on camera, you can also unmute yourself and ask a question. If anybody has one, I'll wait for just a minute, and then if not, I have some. All right. All right. Well, I'm curious to know for each of you about how long you've been writing, and when you first knew you wanted to be a writer. I mean, you know, beyond the short stories we all wrote for like elementary school, and we had to learn about how to write a short story. So we'll start with Rosie, since we just heard from you.
I guess for me, I started writing like little poems and stories when I was about 5 or 6. And just as I went through elementary school, I just got more, I always enjoyed writing, the creative writing, whenever we did it in class. And then as a teenager, I went to the Vancouver School of Arts and Academics to focus more on writing. So pretty much all my life, I've been writing in some capacity. And, you know, I'm still hoping one day to get stuff published if I could ever finish anything. So, yeah.
Great. Kristen, same question.
I have a similar answer to Rosie. I've been writing since I can remember. Like, I don't know if anyone remembers those sheets of paper with like the practiced dash line, like for practicing writing, and then it had like a bigger portion for like bigger writing for pictures. I was like making stories like when I could barely hold a pencil or a crayon. And when I think in elementary school, I was writing like stories in my notebook, like during Taekwondo practice and stuff like that. And I guess my family mentioned, oh, maybe one day you'll be a writer. And so that stuck in my head. And I don't know if I ever like at the time it was like, oh, you should be a writer full time. And as I got older, I was like, that's probably not my path, and wanted to go more into education and now libraries and stuff like that. So I think I fell out of love with it. And then my senior in high school, had an amazing teacher who just really inspired me to get back into it. And I owe my continued interest in writing to that year and to that teacher. And yeah, so similar answers my whole life.
Great. Elizabeth, what about you?
Well, slightly similar. I remember writing stuff as a kid. I remember a story I wrote in 2nd grade called Creepy the Ghost, and occasional poems and stuff. But I think I got a little more serious about actually thinking like I might want to write more in my 20s. And then in my 30s, I took a writing course and got some encouragement from the teacher. And it was when I was in my 30s that I sold that story to Highlights for Children, which never got published, which is a thing that unfortunately happens. But my writing really, since then, it's been very much off and on. And recently, the writing that I'm currently doing is really mostly all for work, which includes that writing the book column for The Messenger. but I'm retiring next year, and really that's one of the things that I want to do when I have more time for it. So I really am in the middle of a sequel to Just Like Magic. It's about Lucy, and so well, I don't know if it's really a sequel, it's more of a companion book, but anyway, it's, yeah, that's my story.
Great, thank you. Let's see, do we have any, I'm checking the chat. I'm not seeing any questions there. Interrupt me if something pops up. I was curious about, you know, over the past 18 months, we've all experienced kind of a real drastic change in our day-to-day lives. And so I'm curious how the pandemic has affected your writing, whether that's your routine or the topics you're writing about, or just, yeah, if there's been any effect and what that effect has been. I'll just let anybody who wants to answer that one pop in.
Not really any effect for me, because like I said, most of my writing I've been doing for work, and although I'm working from home now, it's still work. So yeah, just some of the themes that have come up for the book columns have been affected by the events that have been happening in the last year and a half, but that's about it.
For me, especially like the first few months when it was just like totally shut down, I really took that time to work on a project I had gotten back into. I kind of did a NaNoWriMo in April, and I got a lot of that book done. I actually did complete that book. It's about a pair of sisters who develop magical powers after a series of apocalyptic earthquakes. But right now I'm going through a phase where I hate it and want to throw it away. So that's why I didn't read from it today. But I did get it done. So that was because of the pandemic. I got into a real routine of writing every single day, and was pretty productive, even if I do wind up throwing it in the garbage. So
For me, I had well, at the beginning of pandemic, I think wanted to use that time more wisely and ended up not. I was one of those people who also checked out like probably 30 books that last Saturday we were open and didn't touch any of them, just, you know, just basically just trying to survive. And I also tried to participate in that NaNoWriMo in April, Rosie. I know the organization had carved out some time and resources to support people through that. So I did a little bit of that, but I don't know. I think it's been hard to have a creative spirit through this, which I feel like is a downer of an answer, but it's honest. And I think even through this, my attention and patience has also been more fractured. And so I think I always tended to write more shorter, like vignettes. So I have a novel project, but it's just been so hard to even plot it out, that I think I'm shifting now my focus more towards just short stories, or even like microfiction, or small essays, or even poetry or something like that. So I think just catering to the changes in my mind and just adapting to that, and just doing what I can, and even if that's shorter stuff. But I really haven't had a creative spirit through this pandemic, but I am, especially today, reading was great, and I think is a great inspiration to open that back up to, yeah.
Thank you so much for those answers. Yeah, I agree I feel like with Kristen, you know, mostly about having high hopes of all the things you were going to accomplish when we first went on lockdown, and then it quickly that optimism dissipated. Yeah, well, thank you all so much. I have just one final question, if you'll humor me, just because I know that I've sat in a lot of these sessions, and a lot of questions come up about what's the one thing that you can do to be a better writer, and people always say to read more. So read a lot. read as much as you can in different genres. So I'm just curious what y'all are reading now, or if what you are reading now isn't something you would recommend, a recent book that you would recommend to our listeners to pick up that you're enjoying. And I'll just let Kristen go first, and then whoever else can pop in.
Yeah, so as I touching on my answer from before, kind of fractured attention even with reading. And Mary will probably know too that I'm a super user at the library. I tend to check out a lot of stuff, way more than I ever could read, as I mentioned earlier. The one that I am more focused on now is a YA fantasy called Raybearer, and it's set in a like fantasy like African society. And I'm actually reading the sequel right now called Redemptor, and it's I really loved the first one, especially the audiobook version. The narrator was amazing, and it's the same narrator for this book, and I'm really enjoying that. So that's kind of something I'm fired up about right now. But I do tend to check out, have thought of myself as a fiction writer, but I find myself checking out way more nonfiction from the library, and not having the attention span to read through a lot of fiction, actually. So yeah, I just pick up all kinds of random stuff. Yeah, that's the one that I'm reading right now that I'm really enjoying.
Great, thanks. And just in case anybody thinks Raybearer sounds exciting, I know we just purchased it for our book groups, and I know that the YA for the Olds book group, which meets every first Tuesday virtually at the library, we'll be reading that sometime in 2022. So thanks for the rec. Anybody else, or Elizabeth or Rosie?
I do a fair amount of reading, although since my daughter gave me Netflix for Christmas last year, I've also been doing a fair amount of Netflix. But I tend to, when I read fiction, I tend to like to go for the lighter stuff. I love Terry Pratchett. I like cozy mysteries. I like Amish romances, really. But one thing, Mary, you were saying about how people recommend reading if you want to be a writer. I would also recommend listening to books. I think that one of the things that helps me when writing is the fact that when I was growing up, my dad read aloud to the family after supper every night. He did not stop when we started going to school. The books just got older. He went from reading nursery tales to Laura Ingalls Wilder to P.G. Wodehouse and Agatha Christie and classics, and I mean just all kinds of stuff. And I think that just hearing the words, that is really useful too.
I'm actually currently doing a project at work. I'm kind of rolling down on it, but I was doing a deep dive into romance genre, the genre romance fiction, and just really exploring. It's just such a sprawling genre. There's so many different types of books, and I'd always been a little judgmental about it, while at the same time really being drawn towards books that tended to have like a romantic kind of center to them. So I've just given up on pretending I'm not into them. And I'm currently reading a Nora Roberts book. She has a series, Born in Ice, Born in Fire, Born in Shame. So I'm reading Born in Ice right now. And I really like her writing style. And I'm really enjoying reading that. And actually, this book I read from today that I'm working on, I started it out intending it to be more of a classic romance, but it's delved more into, like, I guess, chick lit, if it must be, if I must choose something for it to be. But it definitely has like a very strong romantic center and pull. So yeah, I would just encourage everybody to dive into genres you don't normally do, because there's a lot of snobbery about, oh, it's whatever, it's this kind of genre, it's not anything I'm going to be into. You might be surprised, because I was. So yes.
All right, you heard it here first. Rosie is a romance fan now. All right. Well, thank you so much to all of our readers today for sharing your work with us, not just at the library, but also your writing work here today. Thank you to those of you who were able to join us today for Words and Pictures Festival 2021. We have just one more session after this one. So let me get my schedule up real quick. So we have at 2:15, we have Linda Graham and Molly Hunt, speaking of romance, who write cozy mysteries and contemporary romance each. That's happening at 2:15. And then we have an author-to-author advice for teen writers program also happening at 2:15. So if you have your schedule, we hope you'll join us for one of these events. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our readers. And you all have a wonderful Sunday afternoon. All right, bye.